These are the competitive settings Fortnite pros use to boost FPS and reduce input delay. I've spent hours researching the top pros from Peterbot to Shark to find out exactly what they're running in this new season. Hopefully by the end of this video you will learn something new, and if you do guys, please consider using my creator code, that's Codelife, or a pros code when buying that brand new battle pass. Now let's start off in the video settings. Every pro right now is using either full screen or windowed full screen, since these have consistently shown to have the lowest input delay. If you prefer full screen, just make sure to enable this Windows setting so you don't pick up any extra latency. For resolution, the majority of pros use their monitor's native res, whether that be 1080p or 1440p, with only a handful using stretched resolutions. But to actually get the lowest possible input delay on these resolutions, you need to set your scaling mode correctly in either Nvidia or AMD. Inside of Nvidia, you want to set your scaling mode to no scaling and the perform scaling on display, and in AMD you want to set your scaling mode to center and turn off GPU scaling. Then if you play stretched resolution, inside Nvidia set the scaling mode to full screen and perform scaling on GPU. Oh, and also check the override box too. For AMD, you want to set the scaling mode to full panel and turn GPU scaling on. Below resolution, you'll see VSync, which every pro has disabled. For frame rate limit, you want to firstly make sure you go into Windows and ensure your monitor's refresh rate is maxed out. Don't be that guy who uses 60Hz on like a 400Hz monitor. After that, you'll find that most pros match their limit to a specific monitor hertz. Peterbot, for example, goes for 240Hz, while Bolt goes for 360Hz. For rendering mode, you want to use performance mode. May that be the DX11 one or the DX12 one. Both are great and they will lower the visual quality of your game and give you more FPS. Personally, I get almost the same performance on both of these, but the general consensus seems to depend on your GPU. I've heard that AMD users prefer the DX12 version, while Nvidia users tend to like the DX11 legacy mode more. When it comes to brightness, most pros in Chapter 7 are using above 25%. Canada, for example, is using 127, Peterbot is using 150, and the reason behind pros boosting their brightness is because it makes enemies way easier to see. It's especially effective in storm fights. Colorblind mode is a similar story. It's also personal preference. Even though most pros do have this turned off, some actually prefer how it changes the look of their game, and depending on which one they like best, they will use. 3D resolution is kept at 100%. Every pro has a good enough PC to run the game at full resolution, so there's no reason for them to lower it and make their game blurry. You would only lower this if your PC is really struggling to get frames. For view distance, most pro players are using far, and no, it doesn't let you see enemies from further away. That's actually capped at a fixed distance. What it does do though is it loads in build, loot and map info a lot earlier when you are gliding in or rotating, and this extra information can be beneficial. Textures are on low for almost every pro, because obviously the lower textures do give you more FPS, although I have seen a few pros with Nvidia GPUs using medium, especially in the Simpsons season, so I don't know if it's just for that season or not. Meshes are on low for literally every pro. These not only improve your FPS with the lower quality of what they look like, they also have a reduced debris effect too, which can make it easier to see players during build fights. And if you see Nvidia Reflex, this means that you have an Nvidia GPU. What this basically does is it reduces the time between your mouse input and the frame appearing on your screen. It does this by lowering the render queue, so frames are not stacked up waiting to be processed. In theory, having Reflex on or on plus boost should lower your input delay, but interestingly, not every pro uses it. Take Canada for example, he keeps this off, so it's one of those settings you need to try for yourself on your PC. Moving on to game settings. For movement, this is a pretty clear split between pros. You've got Peterbot who uses toggle sprint, same as Canada, while others prefer the hold 2 sprint. Auto open doors, this is usually turned off, as most pros want full control over their movement, especially inside of builds. For mantling and hurdling, most pros seem to use hold jump for mantle activation and press jump for hurdle activation. It gives more control and avoids random movement you get from hold forward. For combat combat settings, hold to pick up is split across the pros, so whichever one matches your playstyle you definitely want to use. ADS is almost always on the while held option, as most people prefer to hold it than to toggle. Auto pick up weapons is used by a lot of pros, including Peterbot and Canada. Same with auto sort consumables. Both settings save time and keep your inventory organized without much thinking. As for preferred item slots, this is used by a lot of pros because it's a great way to pre-assign where your items will land, so you don't constantly have to organize your inventory. Simple build is a brand new setting and most pros do think it's terrible. It's only really useful if you are new to building or the game, so most pros do turn this off instantly. Disable pre-edit option is usually on in the pro scene, but I have seen some pros like Clicks turn it off for certain players. Auto confirm edits is one of the most debated settings amongst pros. Peterbot loves it because it removes an entire step and speeds up his editing, but plenty of pros still prefer the manual edits. For the extra game settings at the bottom, you'll find that most of these are personal preference, but I do see a lot of people maxing out the FOVs. I see a ton of people turning off the replays unless they need them for content, and then on top of that they'll turn off every energy saving option for an extra small FPS boost. For HUD settings, most pros keep these very simple. You'll find a lot of them using cumulative damage as it does the math for you, so why wouldn't you use it? I also see hit only used a lot, along with reticle ammo indicator, and they'll usually put their damage numbers scale to the max, so it's easier to see how much damage has been dealt. And when it comes to the HUD scale, this is always pretty low. It's never on the default. You'll usually find it between 70 and 80% with pros. And if we scroll down through the rest of the settings, these are pretty much set up like this for the least amount of clutter on screen. For audio settings, the most important thing is the sound quality being set to high. 3D headphones are also turned off because they can distort directional audio and make footsteps harder to track. For the Hitmarker sounds, these are personal preference. The Legacy will give you that classic sharp click type of sound. You'll find a lot of people prefer this because it sounds familiar, whereas the newer default one is a bit more modern and it has a more thuddy expressive sound. It sounds like it provides a lot more weight to each shot you land. Oh, and for the subtitles, most pros are rocking these settings on screen. Visualize sound effects is one setting that is a must. It provides great information that can help you locate not only your enemies but other things around the map. Overall, it will just massively increase your awareness in game. You'll also find in the Windows sound settings that a lot of them have 48,000 Hz studio quality, while also using exclusive mode and having the communication set to do nothing. Inside the mouse settings, for pro player sensitivities, these are obviously personal preference, but when I analysed all of their sensitivities, there was a clear trend. I found out that 6.4 was the most common X and Y sensitivity in competitive Fortnite, and this makes sense because the game has been in a low to mid sensitivity meta for quite a while, especially with those larger mouse pads that get used at LAN. On top of that, there also was a trend with the mouse DPIs and pollen rates. It turns out that 800 DPI was very popular along with 1000 Hz pollen rate. This makes sense because 400 DPI is very slow and outdated, and high DPIs like 1600 can be too uncomfortably high. When it comes to pollen rate as well, not many pros use it above 2000 Hz. Yes, you can technically say that having a higher pollen rate does lower your input delay, but what a lot of people forget is this can cause more CPU usage and overall less stability with your game, so a lot of players don't even risk it and just stick with 1000 Hz. As for the rest of the mouse settings, like building and editing sensitivities, you'll find that these are usually on 100% most of the time, but according to Destiny Jesus, we may see more and more pro players finally start to increase these values. For the zoom scaling setting, this changes how your sensitivity feels when you ADS. Off keeps it the same across all zoom types, which can make higher zoom scopes feel too sensitive. Legacy will scale with your FOV, and standard scales based on the target size. Overall, the Legacy will feel the most familiar for most. That's why most pros do use Legacy. Now that we've covered the mouse settings though, just below it you will find the movement settings. A lot of the best players right now in the game are using a custom diagonal movement. It gives you controller-like angled strafing, which makes peeking and swinging around builds a lot more natural. I've seen plenty of pros running angles like 68, 90 and 135, but I'll put a few different ones on screen so you can get an idea of what every pro is using in the game. Not every pro player uses it though. A lot of players like Peterbot actually have this setting turned off, and they much much prefer sticking to the default movement because it fits their playstyle more so. And finally, for the settings, we've got keybinds. Yes, keybinds are personal preference, but there's also a pretty big trend of what the pros use in terms of the most common keybinds. From my research, I found that 37% of pros use the wall on the mouse button 5, 22% have their floor on X, 32% have their stairs on mouse button 4, 28% have their roof on left shift, and 52% have their edit on F. That information might benefit some of you, but for a lot of you it probably won't. The main idea with keybinds is to find the best ones for you and your playstyle. Out of every single pro, I think Poyo has the best keybinds, so if you do need some inspiration, I would copy his, but overall you do want to just make your own keybinds. Moving on to some FPS boosting settings, we've got the best Windows settings. Almost every pro player has switched over to Windows 11 due to Windows 10 being discontinued for quite a while. With that in mind, there are a few Windows 11 settings that pros do change to boost their FPS. The first one they do is open their run box and type in this command on screen. What this will do is take you to the visual effects setting where you can then click adjust for best performance, which will turn all the settings off. However, to keep like Windows usable, it's very important that you select these options that I've selected on screen. Next from that, if you head into the Windows settings under gaming, I recommend you do not use game bar. You want to turn that off. Same with captures, turn that off. But where it says game mode, you might want to keep this on, as this can help stabilize FPS in games like Fortnite. After that, if you go into the graphics section, you want to turn on hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. This can reduce system latency a little and make the game feel smoother. Then just below that, you can click on browse and you can add the Fortnite client if it isn't there. You can also click options and set it to high performance. Once you've done that, I highly recommend you guys try the ultimate performance power plan. It's probably the best power plan there is. To get it, just open up the command prompt as admin, then enter in this command that I'll leave in the description below, and from there you can select it in the power settings. If it doesn't feel right, by the way, on your system, you can always switch back to high performance or even balanced. Oh, and one last thing you should check is your system uptime, as this can cause a lot of FPS drops for some people. To do so, just open up the task manager, go into performance and look at the uptime number. If it is extremely high, that is because of Windows fast startup, which some of the numbers might actually surprise you. To reset it, it's super easy. You can just hold shift while clicking shut down, and this will properly restart your PC and in turn clear your uptime. Moving on, I want to talk about the Nvidia settings. Most pros are mainly focused on two things inside of here. One is visibility and two is stability. For visibility, a lot of pros go into this section of the settings and they make sure they increase their digital vibrance. The most common range I've seen is anywhere from 60% to 70%. What this does is it makes colors stand out more. It helps enemies pop out against the environment so they're easier to see, and best of all, it doesn't affect your FPS at all. Next from that, they'll go into this section. This is where pros like to change a few settings to lower their input delay. It's very likely that if they're using native, they'll have their scaling mode on no scaling and their perform scaling on display. However, if they use stretched resolution, they will have their scaling mode on full screen and their perform scaling on GPU. Next from that, in their 3D settings, there is one option inside here that I would recommend changing right now. That is the shader cache size. I think 10 is the best setting in here, and it's a lot better than the driver default, which is around 4, I believe. This will help the game compile more shaders and it'll in turn reduce game stutters. Outside of that setting, there is a few more you can change and get benefits from, but it's very important you check out this video so you understand what each one does. I'll leave a link below where I go into more detail. Oh, and another thing not to forget, when pros are updating their GPU drivers, they usually click this setting right here that allows them to do a clean install, which removes all the leftover bloatware that can cause stutters. So I highly recommend that you click this button when you are installing new drivers. And that right there is the best competitive settings in Fortnite Chapter 7 Season 2. If you learned anything new or if any of this helped you, please consider using my creator code when buying that brand new battle pass. Before you do go as well, feel free to check out any of my other videos on screen right now.